Pause. My name's Faye FX, and I'm here to interview the legendary Shanghai Kate at her studio in Austin, Texas. Hi Kate, how are you doing?
Hi Faye, I'm fine. Thank you for coming.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. So I wanted to ask, can you tell me what the industry was like when you started tattooing?
Well, when I started tattooing, civilians didn't get tattooed and women didn't get tattooed. It was strictly men and military men at that. So shops were very few and far between, and there were a handful of tattoo shops and owners who were really dedicated to tattooing. It was largely coming out of in America, the carnival atmosphere. We didn't have television, so the way that we got entertainment was circuses and carnivals, and of course in the carnivals there were sideshows. And so a lot of the tattooing and a lot of the tattoo artists came out of the carnivals as exhibitors or as actual tattoo artists. Huck Spalding, for example, and Paul Rogers. Tattooing was looked upon as a very low class activity. Even in the military, it wasn't really looked upon as something that was desirable. But in boot camp or in training bases, very often the very last thing that one of the drill instructors would say is that, you know, a sailor without a tattoo is like a prostitute without a vagina. He wouldn't quite say it that way, but that's the essence of what he would say.
Quite an analogy.
Yeah, so they would come rushing into tattoo shops, these military kids, young, 17, 18 years old, and want to get little tattoos to prove that they were actually strong enough to be in the service. There was no exposure to tattooing. The media wouldn't touch it, and I was an oddity in and of itself because I was a woman, and so my experience of being a woman, first of all, was that I was a novelty that would attract servicemen or sailors because of just my gender. So I was kind of special in that I could be used to bring a lot of business to a shop um, because they hadn't seen a woman for a couple of at least months, if not longer. And so they wanted to get a tattoo from a woman who could remind them of their mother, their sister, you know, their girlfriend, their wife, whatever. Didn't matter what she looked like as long as she could tattoo. And then they could brag about the fact that it was a novelty. So the shops that I sat in would be busier because the fact that I was a woman brought attention to that shop. Uh, but also the the attitude generally was that tattoo artists or tattooed people were low class people, and we fought really hard to try and elevate that. Um, so it was very sparse. It was very slow. And then when I was starting in New York City too, it was illegal within the five boroughs, and that's where I began.
And what year was that? Sorry.
That was in Well, it was made illegal. It was banned in the five boroughs in 1961, and it was banned until 1997. So within the five boroughs of New York, that's Manhattan, uh, Brooklyn, Staten Island, um, the Bronx, and Queens, you couldn't get a tattoo, which is a really big metropolitan area where tattooing was illegal. That's what largely drew me to it, was that I could investigate it as an art form that was underground. That appealed to me a lot, but also it kept me from being noticed when I first started because it was illegal. I couldn't be seen. Tattooing could not be seen in New York City, so I could tattoo and I could start my career underground, and that gave me some privacy from anybody looking at me.
Okay. And if tattooing was illegal in New York at the time that you started, how did you learn to tattoo? How did you find someone to teach you? Because apprenticeships are quite hard to get anyway, I imagine. In that climate, it must have been a real challenge just learning from someone.
Well, there were no such things as apprenticeships
Yeah.
back in the day. It was people would bring you in. That was
Mm.
what they say. He brought me in. So Michael Malone and I were investigating tattooing on the East Coast, all over the East Coast, not just in New York. We started in New York, but then we branched out. And we were hanging out with Tom DeVita, who was an underground tattoo artist. And he was the one who introduced us to Huck Spalding, who tattooed in upstate New York, where it wasn't illegal. And so we were able to hang around with Huck and learn the vocabulary of tattooing, learn to watch him incessantly, and then talk to Tom and talk to Huck. And then Huck would bring other people to his tattoo shop for us to talk to. And then we were pretty much self-taught. We went to see Cliff Raven, and he gave us some other information. But largely, we opened a little tattoo shop in Manhattan called Catfish Tattoo Studio, and we just started. We were so enamored with the art, and we wanted to do it. So we, like anybody else, if apprenticeships now are about 5 years long, or they should be, and they are structured. We didn't have such a structure. It kind of followed naturally, that structure. We started out learning the history, of course, and then we learned how to make needles, and then we learned how to mix color, and then we learned how to draw flash. And so it was kind of the same structure as an apprenticeship, a structured apprenticeship now, but we didn't know it at the time. It was just fly by the seat of your pants, kind of.
Okay. So you've become a figure of history and you're respected as a pioneer in the industry. What does it feel like living through such an era of the commercialization of tattooing?
Well, I never think of myself as a legend or a pioneer. I know that I am one because of just looking back on the things that I've done and where it's come. I'm not a fan of the commercialization of tattooing now. It's completely changed. I mean, once MTV started, and the musicians and the rock, the sports stars and the sports figures started getting tattooed, then they kind of blew the doors off of it. And then the television, of course, has exposed it to a lot more people, but it's also watered it down in some ways, I think, and it's made it not as holy as it once was. It used to be a very I don't know, a very secret and very special thing, and people, and it still is, but people take segments of it, little tiny bits of it, and think they know the whole picture. They know a tiny bit, and then they think they know it all, and that is far from the truth. Patience has to be developed in tattooing. You have to learn how to go through the steps and learn them, and it's a very difficult procedure to learn because everybody is different. For example, a 14-year-old or an 18-year-old Irish girl who wants to get a little banger on her is a very different proposition than a 45-year-old black roofer who's been outside in the sun all the time. So there's just so much to learn about tattooing. It isn't until you've put in about 30 years that you really, I think, have a grasp of what's going on. It breaks my heart at some of the commercialization that's happened in my industry. I think it's a spiritual work. For me, it is. I think it's a work of energy, and I think it's a very special relationship that I build with my clients, and I do not like the commercialization that I see of it.
Okay.
And this is, of course, Friday the 13th, and my apprentice is doing a Friday the 13th special tattoo. If you want to talk about the commercialization of it, today is the very best day to do it.
Yeah, it's a very topical day for tattooing, isn't it? And studios all around the world doing their flash sheets of 13 tattoos.
Tattoos should never be $13. Tattoos are a marker of your life. They are a memory. Every tattoo is a memorial of whatever was happening to you at the moment. Like we tattooed you today. And so that's going to be a memorial of our relationship and our friendship.
Definitely.
And
It's a very special tattoo for me to get,
yeah,
and feel honoured that you fit me in today. And it was fantastic to meet my idol and get the tattoo that you were told you couldn't have because you're female. And here
right.
you are tattooing it on me, except I didn't have to wait 40 years.
Yeah,
And it's a great piece of history to wear, and
a great
yeah, it's quite
story to tell.
significant of where we're at now with the story of tattooing as
Yeah.
well.
Hmm.
Yeah. What challenges did you face as a female tattooist?
Oh my God.
You said it was a pro because you were like a novelty, but obviously there must have been some difficulties as well in that journey.
Well, nobody wanted to. I had a wonderful entry into this business though, because Michael and I did this art show at the Museum of American Folk Art back in 1971, where we presented a lot of the slides that we had taken over the couple of years when we were researching and documenting and searching for the best tattoo artists in the world. We wanted to find the best in the world for this show. So when we presented the work of Sailor Jerry and Huck Spalding and Paul Rogers, that gave us credibility with these giants because they always believed that their work was notable enough to be on a museum wall. And so when we were able to do that out of gratitude, they would tell us anything we wanted to know. They would share with us whatever they had. We didn't have to do that really terrible, hard apprenticeship where people play jokes on you and, tie you up and leave you in the basement or whatever they do sometimes. We didn't have any of that. We were very respected because of what we had done for the business right at the very beginning. Or I like to call it a craft, really. I really like to call tattooing a craft rather than a business or an industry. It has become an industry, but that's not the prettiest, uh, to me, definition of it. But because we were able to present people like Sailor Jerry and Huck Spalding and Paul Rogers on the walls of this museum, that gave us credibility. Therefore, we were serious. Therefore, they gave us information that we needed to know. They didn't hide. And because I was, I think, smart and talented and tenacious and not going to take no for an answer, I pushed my way through every situation. I was going to tattoo no matter what, and I can be very hard headed. They saw that and appreciated it and helped me even more. However, later, people who were not of Jerry's caliber, not of Huck's caliber, not of Paul Rogers' caliber, would jump on me in an elevator and stick their tongue down my throat. They would try to cut me out of um, the the clientele flow that would come through the door. However, I can always work away around stuff like that. That doesn't really bother me. But sometimes little boys can be very petty, and so I had a lot of challenges with them.
Yeah. Do you think that that's something that gender inequality is still existing in the industry now, and that you know the modern day apprentices are they seeing these kind of challenges?
I don't know. I think that the women now are excelling in a way that they haven't for a long time. I mean, if you talk to any woman that's trying to break into this business, they'll tell you that they've been sexualized, that they've been approached, uh, asking for that sexual favors in order to get any information or to be able to sit in a tattoo shop, and that's exactly what used to happen. I watched that happen many, many times where women were forced to perform sexual favors in order to get any information or in order to sit in a shop. I think that's changing. I think that women, for example, Ryan Ashley, Meraki just won art ink master. That's a big deal that she won over men who were competing. So I think that women are increasingly making their face known in this industry and increasingly uh, demanding respect for what they do in the craft. I think that people need to know that this is a woman's work, that tattooing has always been women's work, that globally around the world, anciently, women were the tattoo artists. Men took it over when machines were invented and could go harder and faster. And that's when it became a commercial entity. Other than that, it's always been a spiritual entity. It's always been a spiritual step in a person's development. And women were the best facilitators for that sort of thing. We were the shamans. We were and are the witch doctors of our cultures. And we are the craft makers. We have always been the craft makers.
That's very true, and you do see that in indigenous tribes that tattoo and have, everyone comes from a tribe and they've all always tattooed, but the ones in more present day that we have more recent history of, I know the northeast India tribes, the Nagaland tribes, it's the queen of the tribe that tattoos, and she tattoos the whole tribe. And if you go way back in the Borneo history, it was women that tattooed women. Yes. So I definitely agree with you there. You've worked all over the world and with many of the biggest names in tattooing. Is there anyone in anywhere that you still want to visit, or people that you'd like to work with?
Well, meeting you has sparked my lifelong desire to go to Borneo and Malaysia and Singapore and Bali and New Zealand, of course. I'm kind of at the end of my career. I've been tattooing 47 years. I'm 75 years old soon. So, of course, I know the very best people in the world, from Philip Liu to Shige, the masters of tattooing, and Trevor Marshall, Leo Zulueta. Ed Hardy was my best friend for years and years and years. Zeke Owen, who is breaking my heart because he's no longer able to even communicate. I am very lucky that I get to sit with whomever I want to visit. So I can't think of anyone specifically that I would like to sit with. I mean, Mario Barth did my arm. I'm very happy to wear the best work. Jack Rudy comes and visits with me all the time, and he works out of my shop several times a year. I really can't think of anyone that I would like to learn from. I think at this point in time, I know Polynesian work. I'm not saying I know it all. I, helped develop Black and Gray to the form that it's now a very recognized art. And I love to sit with Robert Foe and watch him work. I love to just watch other people work. I mean, Robert Hernandez in Spain blows me away. There's so many that I can't even focus on one. They're just geniuses, and I'm lucky that I can talk to them, sit with them, watch them, and they accept me. So
that's amazing. You've definitely worked with all of the greats, so what a great career. You're currently touring your award-winning lecture, Voodoo to Vogue. And what's that about, and how can people see it?
Well, Voodoo to Vogue is one of my favorite things right now. It is a global overview of tattooing history from the dawn of time to now. And one of the exciting things that I learned was that it is a female craft, and that women were the crafters since the dawn of time. And, constantly we're having revelations that supports that theory, in that we find mummies, or we find frozen bodies that show that only the women and warrior women were tattooed. So the Voodoo to Vogue is an overview of that, and it's also sprinkled with anecdotal information about my own career and how I've seen tattooing change. and some of the experiences that I've had in tattooing, which have been humorous, not quite as dry as it seems right now. Also, I presented at conventions, and I am also asked to present it at universities and at art uh, galleries from time to time. So I've presented at Columbia University 3 times and Lincoln Center and in New York, and I'm going to do it a few times now in the conventions that I attend. So if you are interested in seeing my lecture and talking to me and being involved in the seminar, you can look at my schedule that's posted on my webpage, and my website is www.shanghaicates.com. And wherever I'm having a presentation of this seminar, I post it on my website. So if you can visit me at one of the seminars or one of the conventions that I'm doing, I'd love to see you, and we can talk about the history of tattooing.
Well, I'm definitely going to check your website for upcoming dates and schedule one in, because I'd love to hear about that, and your
Great.
stories are fascinating, so I'm hungry for more.
Oh, great. Well, I have a bunch.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit this weekend about documenting all of your history of tattooing and photos and some of the stencils you've shown me. And you're currently trying to record a lot of this history, aren't you? What's your plans moving forward with this?
Well, I recently
Your
got
museum.
married.
Yeah.
I have a little museum that I'm building here in Austin, Texas. And there isn't a tattoo museum in Texas. So this one should exist, and I'm the right person to do it, I think. My husband is also very keen on helping me do these books. There are several books that I have in progress. One is called Time of Giants, and that is comprised of all of the letters that I've received from Ed Hardy, Paul Rogers, X Spalding, Michael Malone, Painless Jeff, a bunch of people who have written to me over the years, and so a lot of photographs that I have of them too. And so I'm doing that book, and then I also have the photos of Michael Malone that I'm going to present as the New York Times. And that's the photos that we took during the several years that we documented tattooing on the East Coast. And then I have a book called Voodoo to Vogue, which is a companion book to my lecture. And there are a couple of other smaller books that I'd like to write about my years at Tattoo Land, and also my autobiography, which is wide ranging.
You've certainly got your work cut out to put all that together. Yeah.
I do.
Such important work, though. You've got so much to accumulate, and so many years and experiences to reference on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you've got the right team to give you a hand with your apprentice and your husband.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, you must have been through many ebbs and flows in tattooing with the different trends and fashions and changes in this craft. Where do you see, with the current market saturation and it being a fashion trend, what do you think is going to happen next? Where do you predict this is going?
I wish I could say. I mean, because I have, heard many other older tattoo artists predict the demise of tattooing.
Lyle Turtle does, doesn't he?
Oh, he does.
Yeah.
They all do. They say, this is as big as it's ever gonna get. When the conventions happened, everybody said, well, this is the end of tattooing now. It's just gonna die out. It's gonna, but I don't know how it's gonna die out. When you think about it, every day thousands and thousands of new babies are born, and every day thousands and thousands of new new children turn 18, and they're the ones who want to get tattooed. And so I don't know how it's going to die out, other than some horrible new skin infection pops up or something. But the people who have always protected tattooing have been the tattoo artists, not the health department, not OSHA, not some federal agency that's come in and taught us how to sterilize, or how to clean the skin, or how to watch out.
Them, you mean?
Yeah, well, I have taught a few of them. Yeah, but we did it. We were the ones who stayed on top of this. Zeke Owen's the one who brought sterilization into this industry,
exactly,
because he wanted to know how to keep tattooing in New York City. Once it was outlawed, he said they can outlaw it anywhere. So he asked what hepatitis was, found out how to prevent it, and told Sailor Jerry, we have to do this. And so it trickled down through the industry or the craft.
Mhm.
So I don't know that it's ever going to die. As far as where it's going to go now, I would have never, ever expected that things like pointillism and these geometric styles of tattooing would have ever popped up. I have you know, bookcases full of books that I thought I was a graphic designer. So I used to come up with these, with these visions of images for tattooing that I thought would be really great images for tattooing. And then I thought, no, it could never be done. And it couldn't be done when I thought of it because the technology hadn't advanced. The needles were too thick to do portraitures, for example. You couldn't have done the kind of portraitures that are so photorealistic as they are now with the kinds of needles that Sailor Jerry and Huck Spalding and I were working with back in the day. They were like nails, and now the needles are like whisper thin, so you can make these portraits and look exactly like a photograph. We could have never done it with the technology that we had
Yeah.
40 years ago. So I have no idea to know what kind of
What
technology
next?
is coming next.
Mm.
People are developing robotics. People are hoping that they can get robots to tattoo people. That's really anti tattooing. That's going the wrong way because tattooing is really an exchange of energy from me to you, from you to me, and then the experience that we've had, and now the memories that you have. You're not going to get that with a robot.
No, and they certainly can't. I can't imagine they'd be able to feel, putting the ink under the skin and the tension on the skin and things like that you just
Right.
need your hands for. So,
Right.
yeah, I'm not sure how that would work either.
No, it's a human craft.
Yeah. So my final question would be, what message would you like to pass to the millennial generation of tattoo artists?
Well, I always like to say, anybody getting into this industry to respect your elders, number one, because we paved the way, because we have seen it all, because we know it all. After 30 years, we do know a lot about how to do this effectively. Also, when you're in our presence, keep your eyes and ears open and your mouth shut. Don't pretend that you are going to, blow us away with your intelligence or your know-it-all attitude. This is a craft that is age-old and respectful. It needs to be respected. Charles Darwin went around the world, and after 17 years of investigating everything, he came back saying that human beings all share four things. They all sing, they all dance, they all masquerade or dress up for important occasions, and they all tattoo. So tattooing is in our DNA. Know that this is something that's a lifelong pursuit, and please be curious, stay curious, and stay patient. It's not something you rush through. It's not a Saturday night, hurry up and make money and then go to the bar and drink whiskey. That's not what tattooing is. Tattooing is the love of life and everything in it. It encompasses every science and every aspect of art, and have a great time with it.
Kate, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with me and to share the tattooing experience with me today. And spend the weekend together has just been absolutely magical. So that certainly ticks something off of my bucket list, which is coming to meet my idol. And thanks for all the messages you've left as well. So we look forward to seeing Voodoo to Vogue, and yeah, I look forward to meeting you again. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Faye. It has been a real pleasure. Thank you
Great.
so much.